The Vasquez family had been in America for just under 8 months when Elena landed the job at the Richardson estate. It wasn't what her parents had dreamed for her back home, but these days, dreams had to take a backseat to putting food on the table. Elena smoothed down her gray uniform as she entered through the service door of the mansion. The Richardson family was hosting another one of their famous dinner parties tonight, which meant all hands on deck. The air smelled of roasting meat and expensive perfume, a combination that still felt foreign to her after 2 months of employment. "You're cutting it close, Mrs. Chen," the head housekeeper said with a quick glance at the clock. Her face softened slightly. "But you're still on time. The guests will be arriving in an hour. I need you to finish polishing the silver in the dining room and then help set up the refreshments in the ballroom." Elena nodded, her dark eyes focused on the floor out of habit. "Yes, Mrs. Chen. The Richardson house wasn't just a house, it was a statement. 3 stories of old money and influence, with hallways longer than the entire apartment Elena shared with her uncle's family. Every surface gleamed with polish, every corner decorated with something that probably cost more than she'd make in a year." As she worked on the silverware, she could hear the staff bustling around preparing for the evening. The chef was barking orders in the kitchen. Florists were arranging last-minute bouquets, and somewhere upstairs, she could hear the distinct voice of Mrs. Richardson instructing someone about the proper way to arrange the guest bedrooms. Through the window, Elena spotted Mr. Richardson arriving home, his sleek car pulling into the circular driveway. He stepped out, talking animatedly on his phone about some business deal. Behind him, another car arrived, this one driven by their son, Tyler. Elena's stomach tightened at the sight of him. Tyler Richardson was everything she'd come to understand about wealthy American teenagers from television, except worse because he was real. At 19, he was home from his first year at an expensive university, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. He slammed his car door and bounded up the steps, followed by 3 friends who had the same polished look, designer clothes, perfect haircuts, and smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Elena quickly finished the last fork and slipped out of the room before they entered the house. The less she had to interact with Tyler, the better. In the kitchen, chaos reigned as the catering staff prepared trays of elegant appetizers. The head chef, a tall man with a perpetual frown, inspected each plate with military precision. "More garnish on these," he commanded, pointing to a tray of tiny pastries. "And tell Raj that if he overcooks the beef again, I'll have his head." Elena kept to the edges of the room, gathering clean glasses for the ballroom. The grand piano stood in the corner of that vast space, its black surface reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. Sometimes, when the house was empty, she would stand near it and remember, but never touch, never that. By 7 o'clock, guests began to arrive. Men in tailored suits and women dripping in jewelry filed through the front doors, greeting the Richardsons with air kisses and practiced laughs. Elena and the other household staff transformed into near-invisible beings, circulating with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, eyes down, movements efficient. "Did you see the new exhibition at the Powell Gallery?" a woman in a red dress asked loudly. "Absolutely divine, though I told Gerald the pricing was absurd even for modern art." "Speaking of absurd," her companion replied, "have you heard about the Thompsons' divorce? Apparently The woman lowered her voice to a whisper that Elena couldn't hear as she passed by with her tray. The ballroom filled quickly. Important people from the city, politicians, business owners, old money families with names Elena recognized from buildings downtown. Mrs. Richardson floated between groups in a shimmering blue gown. Her blonde hair swept up elegantly, playing the perfect hostess. "Elena." Mrs. Chen appeared at her side suddenly. "Take these empty glasses to the kitchen and bring back the special reserve champagne. Mr. Richardson wants to make a toast soon." Elena nodded and gathered the discarded glasses onto her tray. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Tyler and his friends who had positioned themselves near the doorway. "Whoa there," Tyler said, stepping back dramatically. "Careful with those, housekeeper." "Pretty sure one glass costs more than your weekly salary." His friend snickered. The tallest one, a boy with copper-colored hair, looked Elena up and down with undisguised amusement. "Sorry, sir," Elena murmured, trying to step around them. "Sorry, sir." The copper-haired boy mimicked her accent. "Where are you from, anyway?" "Guatemala, Mexico." "Leave it, Theo," said the third boy, though he was smiling too. She's just doing her job. I'm just making conversation, Theo protested. Cultural exchange and all that. Tyler leaned against the doorframe, blocking Elena's path. Actually, I've been wondering that too. You've been working here how long now? 2 months? And you barely speak. Elena felt heat rising to her cheeks. Excuse me, please. I need to go to the kitchen. You know what I think? Tyler continued as if she hadn't spoken. I think our little maid here is hiding something. She's way too quiet. Maybe she's a spy. Or an illegal, Theo suggested, taking a sip of his drink. My papers are in order, Elena said before she could stop herself, immediately regretting engaging. Tyler's eyebrows shot up. Oh, she speaks. And with some fire, too. He exchanged glances with his friends. Interesting. Elena tightened her grip on the tray. Please, I need to pass. The third friend, who hadn't spoken much, suddenly nudged Tyler. Your mom's looking this way. Tyler straightened up and stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. By all means, proceed with your important duties. Elena hurried past them, feeling their eyes on her back. In the kitchen, she deposited the empty glasses and leaned against the counter for a moment, taking deep breaths. You okay? Asked Raj, one of the catering staff. He was chopping herbs at lightning speed, barely looking up. Fine, Elena replied automatically. Just busy out there. Rich people parties, Raj said with a knowing nod. Same drama, different zip code. Elena managed a small smile and collected the tray of special champagne. When she returned to the ballroom, she noticed Tyler and his friends had moved to the area near the piano. They were huddled together, occasionally glancing in her direction and laughing. Something about their body language made her uneasy. The evening progressed in a blur of serving, clearing and avoiding eye contact. Mr. Richardson made his toast, something about business success and community leadership that received enthusiastic applause. More food was served. A string quartet played softly in one corner. Around 9, Elena was refreshing the water pitchers when she overheard Tyler speaking with his mother. We should have some real entertainment, he was saying. That quartet is putting everyone to sleep. Mrs. Richardson sighed. What did you have in mind? It's too late to book anyone. What about the piano? Tyler gestured to the grand instrument. Uncle Philip used to play at these things all the time. Philip isn't here tonight, Mrs. Richardson replied. And I don't think anyone else. I'll find someone, Tyler assured her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Trust me, Mom. It'll be the highlight of the night. Mrs. Richardson looked skeptical but nodded before being pulled away by another guest. Tyler immediately turned to his friends with a mischievous expression. Elena moved away, focusing on her task. But she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Tyler was planning involved her somehow. She caught snippets of their conversation as she worked around the room. Perfect setup. Hilarious. Teach her some respect. The night wore on. After the main course was cleared, the guests mingled with fresh drinks. Elena was gathering abandoned napkins when a sharp tap of glass caught everyone's attention. Tyler stood in the center of the room, champagne flute in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he called out, his voice carrying across the now quieting crowd. As wonderful as this evening has been, I think we could all use a little musical entertainment, don't you? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the guests. Unfortunately, Tyler continued, our usual pianist couldn't make it tonight, but, he raised a finger dramatically, I believe great talent often hides in unexpected places. Elena froze, a chill running down her spine as Tyler's gaze found her across the room. In fact, he said, I've recently discovered that we have an undiscovered musical talent right here among us. The guests looked around curiously. Mrs. Richardson frowned slightly, clearly not in on whatever her son was planning. Elena, Tyler called out, extending his hand toward her, our very own house staff member. I've heard she's quite accomplished at the piano. All eyes turned to Elena, who stood motionless, clutching her tray of napkins. Her heart hammered in her chest as whispers spread through the crowd. Come now, don't be shy. Tyler encouraged, his smile predatory. Share your talent with us. We'd all love to hear you play something, wouldn't we? There were nods and murmurs from the guests, some looking genuinely interested, others clearly amused by what they assumed would be an awkward performance by the help. Mrs. Chen appeared at Elena's side, gently taking the tray from her hands. What is happening? She whispered. I don't know, Elena replied, her voice bare. Ely audible. Tyler was still waiting, hand extended toward the piano. His friends stood nearby, barely containing their laughter. They had set the trap perfectly, and now they were waiting for her to stumble into it, to either embarrass herself by attempting to play or humiliate herself by refusing. For a moment, Elena considered simply walking out, leaving the job and the mockery behind. But then where would she go? Her family needed this income, and running away would only give Tyler exactly what he wanted, proof that he could control her, shame her, reduce her to nothing with just a few words. Elena looked across the room at the gleaming black piano. Something stirred inside her, something she had buried 8 months ago when they boarded the plane to America, something that had been sleeping, not dead. She straightened her shoulders and took a step forward. The room seemed to stretch before Elena as she walked toward the piano. The polished marble floor reflected the chandelier lights, creating a path that felt miles long. Conversations hushed as she passed, replaced by curious whispers and barely hidden smirks. Is she really going to play? This should be interesting. Poor thing probably doesn't even know which end is which. Tyler and his friends had positioned themselves closest to the piano, ready for front-row seats to her humiliation. Theo nudged the third boy, whose name Elena had learned was Patrick, and they both snickered behind their hands. Tyler stood with arms crossed, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. Mrs. Richardson appeared confused but curious, while Mr. Richardson barely looked up from his conversation with the mayor. Mrs. Chen watched from the doorway, her normally stern face showing a hint of concern. When Elena finally reached the piano, she paused. The instrument was magnificent, a concert grand piano worth more than her family's entire village back home. Its lid was propped open, revealing the complex inner workings of strings and hammers. She ran her fingers lightly over the polished wood, remembering. "Well?" Tyler prompted loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Show us what you can do." Elena turned to face the crowd. Dozens of expectant faces stared back at her, some amused, some uncomfortable, a few genuinely curious. She spotted Mrs. Richardson giving her son a questioning look. "Perhaps this isn't appropriate," Mrs. Richardson began, but Tyler quickly cut her off. "Mom, Elena wants to play for us. Don't you, Elena?" His tone made it clear that refusing wasn't an option, not without losing her job and dignity in one fell swoop. Elena looked down at her hands. They were rougher now than they had been 8 months ago. The calluses from playing had been replaced by new ones from scrubbing, carrying, and cleaning. She flexed her fingers once, twice. "I haven't played in some time," she said softly, her voice carrying in the now silent room. Tyler's smile widened. "Oh, don't worry. We're not expecting much. Just a simple tune. Maybe Chopsticks? Or Mary Had a Little Lamb?" His friends burst into poorly disguised laughter. Several guests looked away, embarrassed by the obvious mockery. Elena took a deep breath and sat down on the bench. The keys felt cool and familiar under her fingertips. How many hours had she spent at a keyboard like this one? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Before everything changed, she closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. Then, without further hesitation, she pressed down on the first key. The note rang out, a single perfect G that seemed to vibrate through the entire room. Pure and clear, it hung in the air like a challenge. Elena opened her eyes and began to play in earnest, not Chopsticks. Not a simple tune. Chopin. Ballade No. 1 in G minor. One of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. The opening phrases flowed from her fingers as if they had never stopped playing, as if the past 8 months of silence had been nothing but a brief pause. The gentle, questioning melody filled the ballroom, immediately silencing all whispers. Tyler's smug smile froze, then slowly faded. Theo's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Patrick's mouth fell open slightly. Across the room, Mrs. Chen's eyes widened in astonishment. Elena didn't see any of this. She was already lost in the music, her body swaying slightly as her fingers danced across the keys. The piece moved from its contemplative beginning into more complex passages, her left hand providing rich harmonies while her right hand articulated the increasingly intricate melody. As the tempo increased, Elena's technique remained flawless. Her hands flew across the keyboard, executing perfect trills and rapid scales that seemed impossible for someone who supposedly spent her days cleaning and serving. The music surged and receded like waves, building emotional intensity with each phrase. A woman in a green dress pressed her hand to her heart. An older gentleman removed his glasses, blinking rapidly. Mrs. Richardson took several unconscious steps toward the piano, her face a mask of disbelief. Tyler stood rooted to the spot. His earlier confidence evaporated. His trick had backfired spectacularly, transforming from a cruel joke into an unexpected revelation. The piece grew more passionate. Elena's fingers struck thunderous chords that resonated throughout the room, then immediately transitioned to passages of delicate beauty. The contrast was breathtaking. Several guests had closed their eyes, carried away by the performance. Mr. Richardson had finally abandoned his conversation with the mayor. He stood with his hand on his wife's shoulder, watching their maid transform before their eyes into something they could never have imagined, a world-class pianist. As Elena reached the climactic section of the ballade, her entire body became part of the performance. The music poured out of her like a story finally being told after months of silence. Her face, usually kept carefully neutral in the presence of the family, now openly expressed every emotion in the piece: longing, determination, triumph, and loss. And there was loss in the music. Chopin had composed it while in exile from his homeland, and Elena played it with the understanding of someone who knew exactly what that felt like. The technical challenges of the piece, the cross rhythms, the octave passages, the constantly shifting dynamics, were handled with the assurance of someone who had studied under masters. As her hands moved into the final section, a tear slipped down her cheek. Though her playing never faltered, Mrs. Chen had moved into the room now, standing beside the catering staff, all of whom had stopped their work to listen. Raj, the chef's assistant, was recording the performance on his phone, his eyes wide with amazement. The ballroom had transformed from a place of social posturing to a concert hall. The guests, many of whom regularly attended performances at the city's symphony hall, knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just skilled playing. This was artistry of the highest level. As the piece approached its conclusion, Elena's fingers flew through the famously difficult coda, executing perfectly the dizzying runs and crashing chords that had humbled many professional pianists. The final phrases resonated through the room, powerful and definitive. Then silence. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. Elena sat still at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, her eyes closed. The spell she had cast over the room remained unbroken for 1 moment, 2, 3. Then someone began to applaud. Another joined in. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in enthusiastic applause. Several people rose to their feet. Mrs. Richardson was crying openly now, clapping with genuine admiration. Elena opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented, as if waking from a dream. The sound of applause brought her back to the present, to the reality of where she was and what she had just done. She rose from the bench and gave a small, awkward bow, unused to receiving such recognition in her current role. The applause continued, growing louder. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" from the back of the room. Tyler stood frozen in place, his face a complex mixture of embarrassment and awe. His friends had backed away slightly, as if afraid to be associated with his failed prank. Patrick, at least, was clapping along with everyone else. Though Theo still looked stunned, Mrs. Richardson approached the piano, her eyes shining with tears and something else, respect, perhaps even shame. That was, she began, then shook her head at a loss for words. "Elena, I had no idea. Where did you learn to play like that?" Before Elena could answer, others crowded around, eager to meet the maid who had just delivered a world-class performance in the middle of their dinner party. "Are you a professional? Have you performed with an orchestra? Who was your teacher?" Elena glanced toward Mrs. Chen, unsure how to handle this sudden attention. The head housekeeper gave her a small nod, permission to step briefly out of her role as staff. "I studied at the National Conservatory back home," Elena said quietly, "before I came to America." "The National Conservatory?" repeated a gray-haired man who Elena recognized as the conductor of the city symphony. "You were on track to be a concert pianist?" Elena nodded. "I was. Things changed." Mrs. Richardson touched her arm gently. "Why didn't you tell us?" Elena met her gaze directly for perhaps the first time since she'd been hired. "You hired me to clean your home, Mrs. Richardson. Not to play your piano. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group closest to the piano. Several guests exchanged glances, suddenly aware of the assumptions they'd made about the quiet young woman who had been serving them all evening. Mr. Richardson joined his wife, eyebrows still raised in surprise. "Well," he said after a moment, "I think we would all agree that you should be playing pianos, not cleaning them." More applause broke out at this statement. Elena felt her cheeks grow warm. This was not how she had expected the evening to go. She had spent months trying to be invisible in this house, and now every eye was on her. Tyler finally unfroze and took a step forward. His face had lost its usual arrogance, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "How did you—" he started, then stopped. "I mean, where did you learn that piece?" Elena looked at him, remembering his cruel smile just minutes earlier. "I practiced," she said simply. "For many years." The conductor pressed forward eagerly. "My dear, would you play something else for us? Perhaps some Liszt or Rachmaninoff?" Before Elena could respond, Mrs. Chen stepped in smoothly. "I'm sorry, but we have dessert service beginning. Perhaps another time." The spell broke. Guests remembered the social nature of the evening and began to move back to their conversations, though many continued to glance at Elena with new interest. Mrs. Chen guided Elena toward the kitchen, providing a much-needed escape from the sudden attention. In the hallway, away from prying eyes, Mrs. Chen stopped and looked at Elena with new eyes. "Well," she said quietly, "it seems you've been keeping secrets." Elena brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm sorry if I caused problems." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Not problems. But things will be different now." "You know that, don't you?" Elena nodded, her mind still half caught in the music, in memories of practice rooms and concert halls and a life that seemed to belong to someone else now. "Get yourself some water and take 5 minutes." Mrs. Chen said, her usual briskness softened slightly. "Then help with dessert service." "Yes, Mrs. Chen." As the head housekeeper walked away, Elena leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her fingers still tingled from the piano keys. For the first time in 8 months, she had felt like herself again. Not a maid, not an immigrant, but Elena Vasquez, pianist. She took a deep breath and headed toward the kitchen. Dessert needed to be served. That was her job, after all. For now, the kitchen was a flurry of activity as servers prepared to bring out dessert. Elena slipped in quietly, hoping to blend back into her role without drawing attention, but word had already spread. "There she is," Raj exclaimed, nearly dropping the tray of chocolate soufflés he was garnishing. The pianist. Other staff members turned to look at her with new eyes. The chef, normally focused solely on his creations, actually paused to give her a nod of respect. "I got it all on video," Raj continued excitedly. "Already has 50 views on my feed." Elena's stomach dropped. "You recorded it?" "Of course. It was amazing. People need to see this." She wanted to protest, to ask him to take it down. But there wasn't time. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Elena, Mrs. Richardson would like you to help serve the head table for dessert." A few staff members exchanged knowing looks. The head table was where the Richardsons sat with their most important guests. Elena was being showcased. "Yes, Mrs. Chen," she replied, accepting a tray of elegantly plated desserts. When she returned to the ballroom, conversations hushed momentarily as people noticed her. She kept her eyes down, focusing on her task, but could feel the weight of curious gazes. The dynamic had shifted entirely. Where before she had been effectively invisible, now she was the center of attention. As she approached the head table, she saw that the seating arrangement had changed. The conductor of the City Symphony was now seated beside Mrs. Richardson, along with a silver-haired woman Elena recognized as the dean of the local music college. Mr. Richardson was deep in conversation with both of them. "Ah, here she is," Mrs. Richardson said as Elena began serving desserts. "Elena, this is Maestro Verducci and Dean Lopez. They were just telling me about a special program at the conservatory." Elena nodded politely but said nothing as she continued serving. This was surreal, being discussed as if she weren't there, yet simultaneously being more visible than she'd ever been in this house. "My dear," Maestro Verducci said, ignoring the dessert placed before him, "where exactly did you study? Your technique is extraordinary." Elena hesitated, aware that every ear at the table was tuned to her response. "The National Conservatory in my home country, sir. I studied there for 12 years. 12 years, exclaimed Dean Lopez. You must have started very young. I was 6 when I began formal training, Elena replied, then added quietly, my mother cleaned the practice rooms at the conservatory. One of the professors heard me playing on an unattended piano and offered to teach me. Mrs. Richardson's eyes widened slightly. And you came to America? 8 months ago. Elena's grip tightened on the serving tray. This wasn't a conversation she wanted to have here now with everyone listening. Sensing her discomfort, Mrs. Chen smoothly intervened. Elena, please check on the coffee service. Grateful for the escape, Elena moved away from the table. As she crossed the room, she noticed Tyler standing with his friends near the bar. They were watching her, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. Tyler said something to the others, then broke away and approached her. Elena, he said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. Can I talk to you for a second? She paused, tray balanced carefully in her hands. I'm working, Mr. Richardson. Please, just for a minute. She glanced toward Mrs. Chen, who gave a small nod. What is it? Elena asked, stepping to one side of the room where they wouldn't block servers. Tyler ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking younger than his 19 years. I want to apologize. What I did? It was stupid and mean. I never thought... He trailed off, then started again. Where did you learn to play like that? I already answered that question at your mother's table. Right, sorry. He shifted uncomfortably. It's just, you're really good. Like concert-level good. So why are you... He gestured vaguely at her uniform. Elena looked at him steadily. Why am I cleaning your house instead of playing in concert halls? He had the grace to look embarrassed. Yeah. For a moment, Elena considered brushing him off, returning to her duties and the safety of invisibility. But something in his genuine confusion made her decide to answer. When you leave your country, she said quietly, you leave everything behind. My diplomas, my performance history, my reputation, none of it matters here. I needed work and this was the job I could get. Tyler's face fell. That's not right. Many things aren't right, Mr. Richardson. If you'll excuse me, I need to help with coffee. As she walked away, she felt oddly lighter. There was relief in being seen, even if the circumstances were far from ideal. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena continued her duties, aware of the whispers and glances that followed her. Occasionally, guests would approach with questions or compliments about her playing, which she acknowledged with brief thanks before moving on. Near the end of the night, as guests began to leave, she overheard Maestro Verducci speaking intently with Mrs. Richardson, wasting extraordinary talent. Criminal, really. With the right opportunities, I understand completely, Mrs. Richardson replied. And I assure you, we'll do whatever we can to help. Elena pretended not to hear, focusing instead on collecting abandoned napkins and glasses. She had learned long ago not to place hope in the promises of the wealthy. Their enthusiasm was often as fleeting as their attention. By midnight, the last guests had departed. The staff worked quickly to restore order to the house, cleaning and putting away the evidence of the evening's festivities. Elena was wiping down the dining room table when Mrs. Richardson appeared in the doorway. Elena, could you come to the study when you're finished here? My husband and I would like to speak with you. Yes, ma'am, Elena replied, her stomach tightening with anxiety. Was she about to be fired? Perhaps they felt embarrassed having a guest serve their other guests. Or maybe they worried she might get ideas above her station now that her background was known. 20 minutes later, she knocked softly on the study door. Come in, called Mr. Richardson's voice. The study was Mr. Richardson's domain, a wood-paneled room with leather furniture and walls, lined with books that Elena suspected were chosen more for their appearance than their content. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson sat on one of the sofas, both still dressed in their evening clothes, though Mr. Richardson had removed his tie. Please sit down, Mrs. Richardson said, gesturing to an armchair. Elena perched on the edge of the seat, hands folded in her lap. You wanted to see me? Mr. Richardson cleared his throat. Yes. First, I want to say that your performance tonight was remarkable. Truly exceptional. Thank you, sir. My wife and I have been talking, and we've also spoken with Maestro Verducci and Dean Lopez. He glanced at his wife, who nodded encouragingly. We believe your talents are being underutilized in your current position. Elena remained silent, waiting for the dismissal she felt sure was coming. The thing is, Mrs. Richardson continued. The dean informed us about a special scholarship program at the conservatory. It's for exceptional international musicians who need support to continue their education and performance careers in this country. They have one spot available for the spring semester, Mr. Richardson added, starting in January. Elena's heart began to beat faster, but she kept her expression neutral. I see. We'd like to recommend you for the position, Mrs. Richardson said. With the maestro's endorsement after hearing you tonight, it's a centi. Ally guaranteed. The scholarship covers tuition, housing, and a small living stipend. Elena's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true. Exactly the kind of opportunity she had given up hoping for months ago. That's very kind, she said carefully. But I have obligations. My family depends on my income. Mr. Richardson nodded as if he'd anticipated this concern. Which is why we're prepared to offer you a different arrangement for the next few months. Instead of full-time housekeeping duties, we'd like you to give piano lessons to our niece who lives with us while attending high school. She has some talent but needs proper instruction. You'd work fewer hours with the same pay and have time to prepare for the spring semester. Elena stared at them, searching for the catch, the hidden cost. Why would you do this for me? Mrs. Richardson's expression softened. Partly because your talent deserves the chance to flourish, and partly, I admit, because I'm ashamed that we never bothered to learn anything about you until tonight. She looked down briefly. That reflects poorly on us, not you. Mr. Richardson leaned forward. Consider it an investment in excellence if you prefer. The world has enough mediocrity. True talent should be nurtured, not wasted cleaning bathrooms. Elena thought of her mother, who had cleaned those practice rooms at the conservatory back home, creating the opportunity that had changed her daughter's life. There was dignity in all work, but there was also truth in what Mr. Richardson said. Her years of training and sacrifice deserved a chance. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll accept, Mrs. Richardson urged. The dean needs an answer by the end of the week. Elena took a deep breath. I would need to discuss it with my family, and I would want to see the details of the scholarship in writing. Mr. Richardson smiled. Of course, I'll have my assistant get everything from the dean tomorrow. In the meantime, Mrs. Richardson added, please feel free to use the piano whenever you're not working. It's barely been touched since my father passed away. He would have loved hearing it played so beautifully. Elena nodded, still struggling to process this sudden turn in her fortunes. Thank you. I should get back to help finish the cleanup. Actually, Mrs. Richardson said, you're done for tonight. Mrs. Chen knows we're speaking with you. Please go home and rest. We can talk more tomorrow. As Elena walked to the bus stop 20 minutes later, the night air cool against her face, she felt as if she were floating between two worlds. The weight of the evening, the humiliation turned triumph, the conversations, the offer, settled around her shoulders like an unfamiliar cloak. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from her uncle. Are you okay? Working late? She began to type a response, then stopped. How could she possibly explain what had happened tonight? How a cruel prank had somehow opened a door she thought permanently closed to her. Coming home now, she typed instead. Everything is fine, better than fine, perhaps. For the first time in 8 months, Elena allowed herself to feel something dangerous and fragile. Hope. As the bus approached, she flexed her fingers, feeling the muscle memory of Chopin's notes still lingering in her hands. Tomorrow would bring questions, complications, perhaps even disappointments. But tonight, for just a little while longer, she would let herself remember who she had been, who she might be again. Elena Vasquez. Pianist. Elena woke before her alarm the next morning, her mind already racing with thoughts of the previous night. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the small bedroom she shared with her cousin Lucia, who was still fast asleep. From the kitchen, she could hear her aunt preparing breakfast and her uncle's low voice as he read the morning news on his phone. For a moment, Elena lay still, wondering if it had all been a dream. The piano, the applause, the offer from the Richardsons, but her fingers still held the memory of the keys, and her body remembered the feeling of the music flowing through her after so many months of silence. She slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Lucia. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same as yesterday. Same dark eyes, same hair pulled back in a practical style, same face that had become accustomed to keeping emotions hidden. Yet everything had changed. Her phone buzzed on the sink counter. A text message from Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Richardson asks if you can come at 10 instead of 8. She wants to discuss your new schedule. So it hadn't been a dream after all. When Elena entered the kitchen, her aunt looked up from the stove where she was frying eggs. You slept late, she observed. Everything okay at work last night? Elena poured herself a cup of coffee, trying to decide how much to share. Her aunt and uncle had welcomed her into their home when she arrived in America, making space in their already crowded apartment without complaint. They deserved to know about this potential change in her circumstances. Something happened, she began hesitantly. At the party. Her uncle lowered his phone, immediately concerned. What kind of something? Did someone bother you? No, nothing like that. Elena took a deep breath. They discovered I can play the piano. Her aunt and uncle exchanged confused glances. The piano? Her aunt repeated. How? Elena explained about Tyler's prank, how it had backfired when she actually played, and the conversations that followed. As she spoke, her uncle's expression changed from concern to surprise to something like pride. So they want you to teach piano now? He asked when she finished. For the same money but less hours? Elena nodded. And they're helping me apply for a scholarship at the conservatory for the spring semester. Her aunt placed a plate of eggs in front of her, eyes wide. The conservatory? Like where you studied back home? Similar, yes. If I get in, and they seem to think I will, it would mean going back to music. Professionally. A silence fell over the kitchen as her aunt and uncle absorbed this news. Elena had never spoken much about her life before coming to America. About the years of training and performances, the competitions won and lost, the future that had seemed so certain until it wasn't. Her uncle reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Your mother would be proud, he said simply. Elena felt tears threatening and quickly blinked them away. It's not certain yet. And even with the scholarship, it would be hard. The stipend they mentioned might not cover everything. We will manage, her aunt said firmly. This is why we came to this country, no? For opportunities, not just to clean houses. There's nothing wrong with cleaning houses, Elena replied, thinking of her mother again. It's honest work. Yes, but it's not your work, her uncle said. Not what you were trained for. Not what you love. Elena smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had worried they might be disappointed about her potentially leaving a steady job, or concerned about the uncertainty of a music career. Instead, they were as hopeful as she was trying not to be. I should get ready for work, she said, finishing her coffee. Mrs. Richardson wants to talk about the details. Tell them you'll take it, her aunt advised. The rest we will figure out together. The Richardson house looked different in the morning light, less intimidating somehow. Elena had always arrived through the service entrance at the back, but today she hesitated, unsure if the new arrangement meant she should use the front door. After a moment's consideration, she decided to stick with what she knew, at least for today. Mrs. Chen met her in the kitchen. There you are, she said, her usual briskness softened slightly. Mrs. Richardson is waiting for you in the music room. The music room? Elena hadn't known there was such a room. Where the piano is, Mrs. Chen clarified with the faintest hint of a smile. What we normally call the ballroom. Elena nodded, realizing that of course a room might have different names depending on its purpose. How many other things in this house, in this country, had she misunderstood because of language and culture? She found Mrs. Richardson seated on one of the sofas near the piano, a folder of papers in her lap and a cup of tea on the table beside her. She looked more casual than Elena had ever seen her, dressed in slacks and a simple blouse instead of her usual tailored dresses. Elena, good morning. Mrs. Richardson greeted her warmly. Please, come sit down. Would you like some tea? No, thank you, ma'am. Elena perched on the edge of the sofa opposite her employer, still feeling out of place despite the invitation. Mrs. Richardson seemed to sense her discomfort. I imagine this is all a bit overwhelming, she said. Yesterday you were our housekeeper, and today we're discussing your music career. Elena nodded. It's been unexpected. For all of us. Mrs. Richardson smiled ruefully. I must confess, when Tyler told me he'd discovered your musical talent, I thought it was just another one of his pranks. I had no idea he was setting up such a cruel joke. I want to apologize for that. It's not your fault, Elena said automatically. Perhaps not directly, But we create the environments our children operate in, she sighed. In any case, let's focus on the future. I've spoken with Dean Lopez this morning, and she's extremely interested in your application. In fact, she's cleared her schedule to meet with you tomorrow if that's possible. Elena's eyes widened. Tomorrow, so soon? The spring semester starts in January, so there's not much time to get everything in order. Normally there would be an audition process, but after last night, Mrs. Richardson smiled. Let's just say the dean is very eager to hear you play again. This time in a
more formal setting. She handed Elena a folder containing information about the scholarship program, the conservatory,
and a preliminary schedule. The scholarship covers tuition and provides a housing allowance and small stipend, as we mentioned last night. In the meantime, we'd like you to start giving lessons to our niece Isabel. She's 16 and has some talent, but her previous teacher moved away over the summer. You'd work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons, 2 hours each day at your current salary. Elena studied the papers, still half expecting to find some catch, some hidden cost, but the offer seemed genuine. This is very generous, she said carefully. Mrs. Richardson waved away her thanks. It's the right thing to do, and frankly, after hearing you play, it would be a crime to keep you scrubbing floors. She paused. I've also spoken with Maestro Verducci. He's offered you a chance to perform with the symphony in their holiday concert series. Elena nearly dropped the folder. What? 3 weeks from now? Just one piece. He suggested the Chopin you played last night. He thinks it would make a wonderful addition to the program. Elena's mind raced. A performance with the City Symphony? After 8 months of not touching a piano? It was too much, too fast. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she admitted. My technique? I'm out of practice, Mrs. Richardson gestured toward the piano. Then practice. The piano is yours to use whenever you want. In fact, she hesitated, then continued more softly. I heard you last night before everyone arrived. You were in here, weren't you? Just touching the keys. Elena flushed, caught. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, Mrs. Richardson interrupted. That's not what I meant. I recognized the longing. The way you touched it like greeting an old friend. She looked away briefly. I used to play, you know. Not at your level, not even close. But I loved it. Life got in the way. Marriage, children, social obligations. I haven't touched a keyboard in years. There was a vulnerability in her voice that Elena had never heard before. A glimpse of the person behind the polished exterior of the wealthy housewife. It's never too late to start again, Elena said quietly. Mrs. Richardson smiled. Perhaps you're right. Maybe you could give me lessons too after Isabel. The idea of teaching her employer piano lessons was so unexpected that Elena couldn't help but laugh. Mrs. Richardson joined in, and for a moment they were just two women sharing a moment of genuine connection. A knock at the door interrupted them. Tyler stood in the doorway looking uncertain. Mom, He stopped when he saw Elena. Oh, sorry, I can come back later. It's fine, Tyler, Mrs. Richardson said. We were just finishing up. She turned back to Elena. Think about the symphony offer. You don't have to decide right away. Elena nodded and gathered the folder, preparing to leave. As she passed Tyler in the doorway, he spoke quietly. Hey, I just wanted to say sorry again about last night. Elena paused. The boy who had tried to humiliate her now looked genuinely remorseful. It's okay, she said. In a strange way, I should thank you. Tyler's eyebrows shot up. Thank me for being a jerk? For making me play again, Elena clarified. I might never have done it otherwise. She continued down the hallway, leaving Tyler to process her words. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Chen preparing the day's meal plan. So, the head housekeeper asked. What did you decide? I think I'm going to accept, Elena replied, still somewhat dazed by how quickly everything was happening. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. Good. You're too talented to waste your life dusting other people's furniture. She handed Elena a cloth. But until your new schedule starts, these windows still need cleaning. Elena took the cloth with a smile. There was something reassuring about the normalcy of the task. A bridge between her old life and whatever this new one would become. As she worked, she found herself humming the Chopin ballade, her fingers moving slightly as if playing invisible keys. For the first time in a long time, the music in her head wasn't a painful reminder of what she'd lost, but a promise of what might still be. Outside the window she was cleaning. The garden stretched out in the autumn sunlight. A squirrel darted across the lawn. gathering supplies for the coming winter. Elena watched it, thinking about preparation, about survival, about adapting to changing seasons. 8 months ago, she had packed away her dreams along with everything else she'd left behind. Now, unexpectedly, she was being asked to unpack them, to dust them off and see if they still fit. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was, against all odds, possible. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of change. Elena's life had transformed so completely that sometimes she woke up wondering if she had dreamed it all. But the reality was there every day. The scholarship papers signed and submitted, the new schedule that allowed her time at the piano, and the growing anticipation of her upcoming performance with the City Symphony. The Richardson house had become a different place for her. She still cleaned 3 mornings a week, her choice, as she didn't want to leave Mrs. Chen short-handed before a replacement could be found. But afternoons were devoted to teaching Isabel, and surprisingly Mrs. Richardson herself, who had rediscovered her love for the instrument. Isabel was a quick study, eager and attentive in a way that reminded Elena of herself at that age. Mrs. Richardson was more hesitant, her fingers stiff from years of disuse, but her joy when she successfully played even a simple piece was genuine and unguarded. "I'd forgotten how it feels," she admitted during one lesson. "To create something beautiful with your own hands," Elena nodded, understanding completely. "It's like finding a piece of yourself you didn't realize was missing." Today was Friday, exactly 3 weeks since the dinner party that had changed everything. It was also the day of her performance with the symphony. As Elena finished polishing the dining room table, her last housekeeping task, she felt a now familiar mixture of excitement and terror. Tonight she would play for an audience again. A real audience in a concert hall accompanied by professional musicians. "All done?" Mrs. Chen asked, appearing in the doorway with her uncanny sense of timing. "Yes." Elena put away the polish and cloth. "Everything's ready for the weekend." Mrs. Chen studied her with knowing eyes. "And you? Are you ready for tonight?" Elena took a deep breath. "I think so. I've been practicing every day." "We know," Mrs. Chen said dryly. "The entire house knows." But there was warmth in her voice and something like pride. "The staff is coming, you know. Raj bought tickets for everyone as soon as he heard." "Really?" Elena hadn't expected that. "Of course. We want to see our famous pianist in her natural habitat." Mrs. Chen straightened an already perfectly aligned chair. "You've worked hard for this. Enjoy it." Coming from the usually reserved head housekeeper, this was high praise indeed. Elena smiled. "Thank you for everything." Mrs. Chen waved away her thanks. "Go on now. You have a lesson with the girl and then you need to rest before tonight." Elena found Isabel already waiting in the music room, her sheet music organized neatly on the piano. At 16, Isabel was at that awkward age between childhood and adulthood, smart and talented but still finding her confidence. Over the past weeks, Elena had watched her transform at the piano, sitting taller, speaking more clearly, taking pride in her progress. "I've been practicing that Beethoven piece," Isabel said eagerly as Elena sat beside her on the bench. "I think I've got the left-hand part down now." "Let's hear it," Elena encouraged. As Isabel played, her brow furrowed in concentration, Elena noticed Mrs. Richardson watching from the doorway. She gave a small wave and Elena nodded in greeting without interrupting her student. When Isabel finished, Elena offered specific praise and corrections, then worked with her on a particularly challenging section. The hour passed quickly as it always did when engaged in music. "That's all for today," Elena said as they reached the end of the lesson. "You've made wonderful progress," Isabel beamed at the praise. "Will you play something before you go? Please, for good luck tonight." Elena smiled. She could never refuse this request, though Isabel made it at the end of every lesson. "What would you like to hear?" "The Chopin. The one you're playing tonight." "Are you sure? You'll hear it again in a few hours." "It's different when it's just us," Isabel insisted. "More, I don't know, personal." Mrs. Richardson had entered the room fully now. "I'd like to hear it too, if you don't mind. One last practice before the big night." Elena nodded and positioned her hands over the keys. The opening notes of the ballade flowed from her fingers, familiar now after hours of practice. But Isabel was right. There was something intimate about playing here in this room where it had all begun, for just these two people who had watched her journey from maid to musician. When she finished, Both Isabel and Mrs. Richardson applauded warmly. "You're going to be amazing tonight," Isabel said with the absolute certainty of youth. "Indeed you are," added Mrs. Richardson. "Oh, I almost forgot, this came for you." She handed Elena a small envelope. Inside was a card with the conservatory's emblem. Dean Lopez had written a personal note. "Elena, looking forward to your performance tonight and to welcoming you as our student in January. Your story reminds us all why we dedicate our lives to music. Dean Lopez." "That was kind of her," Elena said, tucking the card carefully into her bag. "She's not the only one," Mrs. Richardson replied with a smile. "There's a bit of a surprise waiting for you at home. The car is outside to take you there now, so you have time to rest before tonight." "A surprise?" Elena questioned, but Mrs. Richardson simply smiled enigmatically. "You'll see. Now go. Artists need to prepare before performances." The surprise became clear the moment Elena opened the apartment door. Standing in the living room, looking jet-lagged but beaming with pride, was her mother. "Mama?" Elena gasped, frozen in the doorway. Rosa Vasquez opened her arms and Elena rushed into them, hardly believing what she was seeing. "How? When did you—" "Your Mrs. Richardson arranged it," her mother explained, holding Elena at arm's length to look at her properly. "She called me last week, told me everything, and sent the tickets. I arrived this morning." Elena turned to her aunt, who was smiling broadly. "You knew?" "Of course we knew," her uncle said, entering from the kitchen. "Hard to keep a secret in an apartment this size, but we managed." Elena felt tears welling up. Her mother was here, actually here. The woman who had cleaned practice rooms so her daughter could learn to play. Who had sacrificed everything for Elena's education. Who had insisted she leave the country when things became too dangerous, even though it meant they would be separated. "I can't believe you're really here," Elena whispered. "I wouldn't miss it," her mother said firmly. "My daughter playing with the city symphony. I always knew you would find your way back to music." Elena shook her head, still amazed. "Mrs. Richardson did this?" "She said it was important for family to be together for big moments," her aunt explained. "She's right about that, family." The word had meant so many different things over the past year. The people she'd left behind, the relatives who had taken her in, and now, unexpectedly, the household where she worked. All of them supporting her in their own ways. The concert hall was larger than Elena had expected, its soaring ceiling and rows of seats both thrilling and terrifying. Backstage, Maestro Verducci greeted her warmly. "Nervous?" he asked, noting her wide eyes. "Terrified," she admitted. "It's been so long since I played for an audience this size," he patted her shoulder. "The music is in you. Trust it to come out when you need it." From the wings, Elena watched the first half of the program. The orchestra was brilliant, filling the hall with sound that made her heart ache with its beauty. All too soon intermission came and went, and Maestro Verducci was announcing her to the audience. "Tonight we have a special guest performer. Her story is remarkable, but more remarkable still is her talent." Elena smoothed her dress, borrowed from Mrs. Richardson and altered by her aunt, and walked onto the stage. The applause washed over her as she approached the piano, a magnificent Steinway that gleamed under the stage lights. She scanned the audience quickly. In the front row sat her mother, aunt, and uncle, all dressed in their finest clothes. Beside them were Mrs. Richardson, Mr. Richardson, and Isabel. Even Tyler was there, looking uncomfortable in a suit but present nonetheless. A few rows back she spotted Mrs. Chen and the other staff members, including Raj, who gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up. Dean Lopez and several faculty members from the conservatory occupied a section to the right. So many people who had been strangers 3 weeks ago. So many connections formed through a single moment of music. Elena sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The hall fell silent, that magical hush before music begins. She took a deep breath, met Maestro Verducci's eyes as he raised his baton and began to play. The first note rang out, clear and true, just as it had that night at the party. But this time there was no mockery, no trick, no fear, only music, flowing from her fingers as naturally as breathing. The orchestra joined her, surrounding her sound with theirs, lifting and supporting the melody as it soared through the hall. As she played, Elena felt something inside her finally settle into place. The past 8 months of struggle, of feeling lost and voiceless in a new country, of doubting whether she would ever find her path again, All of it seemed to make sense now, like the dissonant chords in Chopin's piece that eventually resolve into harmony. When the final notes faded away, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the audience erupted in applause. Elena stood and bowed, her heart pounding with exhilaration. As she looked out at the standing crowd, she caught her mother's eye and saw tears streaming down her face, her hands clapping until they must have hurt. Maestro Verducci guided her to center stage for another bow, then whispered, "They want an encore." "Do you have something prepared?" Elena hadn't expected this. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I think I do." She returned to the piano alone. The audience quieted again, waiting. Instead of another classical piece, Elena began to play a folk melody from her homeland. A simple, heartfelt tune that her mother used to sing when Elena was small. It was her way of bridging her two worlds, of honoring where she came from while embracing where she was now. When she finished, the applause was even more thunderous than before. Elena bowed one final time, overwhelmed by the moment, by how far she had come from that night when they had invited the maid to play piano as a trick. 6 months later, Elena sat in a practice room at the conservatory, working through a difficult passage in a Rachmaninoff concerto. Her fingers were stronger now, her technique sharper after months of intensive study. Outside the window, spring had arrived, bringing new growth and possibility. A knock at the door interrupted her practice. Dean Lopez entered, accompanied by a younger woman Elena didn't recognize. "Sorry to interrupt," the dean said. "Elena, this is Valerie Wong from the International Piano Competition. She'd like to speak with you about participating this summer." Elena stood to shake the woman's hand, noticing the Richardson family's foundation logo on the folder she carried. Another door opening, another opportunity unfolding. As they discussed the details of the competition, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss and struggle, the moment of humiliation that had become a moment of triumph, and all the people who had helped her find her voice again. Later that evening, she would give her weekly lesson to Mrs. Richardson, who had become not just a student but a friend. On Sunday, her mother would call from back home, eager to hear about Elena's progress and share news about the music school she had started for neighborhood children, funded in part by the Richardsons. And next month, Elena would give her first solo recital at the conservatory, her name on the program not as someone's maid but as what she had always been, underneath the uniform and behind the silence, Elena Vasquez, pianist.